Hey, beautiful people, welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. If you're tuning in for the first time, then welcome. On this podcast, we explore everything around self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Hey, friends, welcome back. Today, I'm very lucky to be speaking with my colleague, Jodie Goss. Jodie is a lightning process practitioner who has practiced in both the US and now back in the UK. She's also my Mindflex partner. And for those of you who don't know, I run workplace wellbeing workshops. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on too. I wanted to get Jodie on this podcast because both of us have really been navigating some big shifts, some big changes in the last few years. And a lot of the conversations we've had behind the scenes have really been on navigating change, us growing through change, and just coming out the other side of challenges, essentially. So we're going to talk about the mind-body connection, change, building resilience, and all of that stuff. So I hope you guys take a lot from this episode. Welcome, Jodie.
Thank you so much, Bianca. It's lovely to be here.
So nice to have you here. So should we just start by letting everyone learn a bit more about you, what you're about, and how you got to where you are?
Sure. So my background initially is actually in radio. I worked as an entertainment reporter for about 10 years through my 20s. And during that time, I had shingles. And was quite poorly. And then once the rush disappeared, I found myself sort of left with very fluey symptoms. So just tired all the time and brain fog, and my body was aching and couldn't seem to get well from that. And I was eventually diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. And as many people are with a CFS diagnosis, told there's not much that can be done, just rest and pace yourself, you might get better. And that was quite a scary place to be in my mid-20s. So I went on sort of a journey of trying lots of different therapies and treatments and alternative and traditional stuff, tests, and not really getting anywhere until I found the lightning process. And I took the lightning process in January 2009. And yeah, that for me was a complete game changer. And I was back at work after a couple of weeks and, got my life back on track, really. That sort of started my interest in neuroscience and holistic well-being and mind-body connection and the nervous system. And I was just slowly behind the scenes. I went back to work and, was reading and learning. And then I ended up getting married. I ran the London Marathon. I had my first daughter. And then in 2014, we had an opportunity to move to Los Angeles for my husband's job. And so for 10 years, we basically lived there. And had a wonderful experience in many, many ways. But when we moved there, I kind of felt like I was done with the radio thing. I also had to be done for some visa reasons as well. But it felt a really good opportunity for me. Because I'd known for a few years, like I want to segue and I want to move my career in a different direction. And so I started to learn NLP. And that's when I decided to train as a lightning process practitioner, which is where you met in London when we were doing our training. And as we both did, became master NLP practitioners, hypnotherapists, life coaching, took the lightning process practitioner training. And so I've been practicing across America and Canada for the past 4 or 5 years. And as I know that we both have done, once your eyes are open in this way, any book or podcast or course or masterclass or seminar or anything, like you cannot take, you just want to learn all the time. It's just so fascinating, and you're sort of adding to your toolbox. And I was using that within the lightning process, but also I do, as you do too, just one-to-one coaching and things like that as well. And that's where we began collaborating for Mindflex. And at the end of 2022, we both did a course on somatic therapy as well. There was lots of crossover for us. And then 2023 was a really challenging year for me. I separated from my husband and I moved back to England with my 2 daughters. And within quite a small period of time, closing up your life in one country and moving, it's a change of friends and a change of home and shipping all my stuff and my dog and trying to find schools for children in England. And I lived with my sister and her family while we were trying to sort out accommodation. So there was a lot of change in quite a small period of time. And I took a break from work last year just because my focus needed to be on my family and what we're trying to sort out. But yeah, 2023 was a really big year of change and challenges. And now 2024 is really interesting, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but it's still navigating some of those changes, but it feels like very much for me a new chapter. And it's been a real learning, which I know you've experienced too through your changes. And I guess this is kind of where this podcast came to fruition, was even though we both dealt with, quite different changes, the feelings that have come up for both of us have been quite similar. The way we've been trying to navigate that through, what do you sit in and what do you just feel and be, and or how and when do we merge that with this incredible toolbox that we've both collated over the years, and use those things to move forward. So this year very much has been navigating those two things, really. And yeah, I guess that brings us to present day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I think that was part of the reason why I wanted to get you on today, because although we have been navigating quite different things, both of us have also been forced to really go through this massive identity shift in different ways. And I really wanted to get you on and chat today because I want to talk about some of the emotions that we've both gone through and how we have balanced being with our emotions and letting ourselves feel the shitty feelings, but also, like you said, being able to apply some of our tools that we know are very powerful to change our state and bring us back to present.
Yeah, I think what I really noticed last year was I found myself to be in a state of freeze a lot of the times. There's, as I've spoken about a lot on the podcast, there's fight and flight, this very natural reaction to threat, which is not a bad thing. We need that. It's helpful in the right situation. And then there's another level, which is when you're in a freeze state, which is almost when the feeling is, for me, I felt very dissociated and like I only focus on what I had to focus on. And I tried to use quite a lot of our brain retraining tools and NLP. And I just felt like, you know what? I just have to be in this. I just have to feel into this and experience it and the suckiness of it and there was this feeling, the visualization that always came to my head was, if you've seen Alice in Wonderland, and she's sort of going through a hole at one point and she's sort of trying to grab onto roots to steady. That's sort of how I felt at times. Kept trying to grab on. I was like, you know what? I just need to let myself fall here. I just need to free fall a little bit. So leaning into that was actually the thing that helped the most. And it's not that it made me feel better as such, because it's incredibly hard to free fall in that way. Sorry, that's my dog in the background. Yeah, she's joining in our conversation today.
I love it.
So yes, I was sort of just letting myself surrender to what was. And when I first came back, I was living with my sister, and I was very lucky because I always had this very safe container. Like, she's my best friend. She knows me inside out, and she allowed me just to be. So much logistical stuff I had to sort out, like finding schools, finding a house and shipping my stuff and the paperwork. And when you've been out of the country for 10 years, you have to, become present again, in society basically here. So that took up a lot of energy and let me do that. There was no questions. And I am lucky, like my siblings, my parents, my best friends, like there was very few people who actually knew what was going on. I remember, like, I would be doing it all day and busy. And I remember my sister saying to me, like, one evening, what do you want for dinner? And that was the thing that, like, pushed me over the edge. I was like, I don't know. I can't think about what I want for dinner. And it was almost like, as our body does, it gave me, I was in freeze. So I could feel that all of my internal energy, as it should have been. And this is that incredible primal response that we have, right? It's like, what do you absolutely need energy for to survive this situation? And it just put that energy into the logistical sorting side of things. And anything else out of that remit, it didn't have the capacity for. And so when she asked me, like, what do you want for dinner? I didn't have the bandwidth for it. It's such a
Mm.
simple, and I was very lucky because she gave me this container where she took all of that stuff off my hands. Right, she literally for me helped, did my washing, stepped in with the
Mhm.
children. To have a day when I just got into bed and laid down and cried and rested, she let me. If I needed to
Oh,
talk, she let me. I needed to get drunk and, have a giggle or laugh or whatever it was. She just let me be. And I
yeah.
think, I'm sure that processing shows up differently on different days. There's no rule book, there's no blueprint. I realized very quickly I just had to surrender to whatever it is that my body was telling me each day that I needed. And even though that
Mhm.
was facing sometimes, because I was like, my to-do list was so long, I had to
Yeah.
listen. And that was, and I realize now, such an integral part of getting through this, of feeling
Yeah.
into it, of the processing. And processing doesn't mean thinking our way through something all the time. It means feeling into it. It's these stress hormones that are circulating through our body that we need to help finish that process and not let it get stuck somewhere in our body. And it can
Complete.
be deeply uncomfortable and hard, but
Mm.
that I realized very quickly was my way through this and out of this. So does that resonate
Yes.
with you too?
Yes. Yes, 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 1,000 times over. I mean, for those of you who are new to this podcast, you haven't heard my story. Jodie's just referring to the grief that I was moving through after losing my mum. One thing that Jodie, you saying that really resonated with me is actually allowing the emotions to come in, whether you make space for them purposely, because I had that same experience with the brain fog, not being able to think straight. It's really so much self-compassion to the point that you just have to let go of all expectations. Although, I did a lot of this by myself and with some close friends. A huge part of it for me was allowing people to support me. For so long, I'd supported other people, and I actually found it really hard to let go and let people support me. So yeah, actually just surrendering, letting people take over, and actually just embracing where you're at in that moment. It's all very much part of when we're moving through the depths of a very challenging time.
Mm. I think as well, what you were saying there about whether you purposely make time for that or whether you just let it come naturally. And again, there's no right or wrong with any of this. I had to make time for it purposefully quite a lot because
Mm,
I've got two children that I was looking
mm,
after, and I still had to get up and get them to school and pick them up and take them to their activities. And, there was also their emotions with all the change that was going on too. So I still do this now. I get up and I have a routine and I wake up quite early. I did something, this was pre COVID stuff. I started
mm,
doing morning. Do you know how,
mm.
I think that's his name,
Yeah,
where
yeah, yeah. How, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
yeah, I'm like an hour before anybody else in the house. And that was my time to read, to do some meditation, to journal, to exercise. And so that's something I still do now. I wake up very early in the morning and make sure I have a pocket of time when I can just be. Then I do my bit
Mhm,
in the morning with the children. And then every day once they're in school, and I have to say this, I have been very consistent with this. I get out into nature. I have a dog
mm,
who's walking, so she's really helped me stick to that. But I get outside for an hour every day and I won't walk around the streets. I go into the woods, I go into the forest, no matter what the weather, and just
mm,
be in nature and have that space and have that time to myself, swim or something like that. So it's really finding those windows. And I don't want to, pretend that I've got this all done perfectly. There's certain days where like it all falls apart, but the other thing is just the consistency in anything that makes me feel I'm showing up for me, because I've learned again, especially now being a single mom, I need to make sure that my bucket is as full as I can have it, that I have enough
mm,
to spill it into my children. And this is why I stopped working for a bit, because when I work with clients, I want to make sure that I've got enough that it's at the standard that I feel is, a really good standard to support and help my clients. So I
mm.
have had to learn that everything begins with me, which
No, no,
is
no.
selfish. It's
Yeah.
a weird concept to get your head around, but self-care, understanding my worth, giving myself grace and understanding, being with moments of frustration, letting things go if I don't show up in the way that I want to, all of this stuff I knew this before, and I'm sure you did too. Like, it's so much of our work as a coach and a lightning process practitioner is helping people connect to themselves and understand their worth and their value and their purpose, and their, connecting with their intuition and their gut and who they are. But experience has amplified that beyond compare. Without that, sounds dramatic, I wouldn't have made it through, but it's been the foundation of everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I've been thinking around this concept of like emotional mastery, like who are those people that seem to move through life and become really resilient? And I think I might have said at the start, I think there's this balance between feeling an emotion and then knowing when it's no longer useful to sit in that emotion. And that's where our tool come in with the lightning process. Is so, so, so powerful. And also, even with the lightning process, I often am bringing it in a really compassionate way, just about trusting my future and letting go and getting into those more trust states, which again is just taking that step into the unknown. And I think even, I'm going a bit rogue here, but back to that point around sitting in the unknown, knowing that you're not who you were once and you're kind of thrusted into this, like, what feels like the middle of thin air, not knowing who you are or what you're about and moving through this identity shift. I think one thing I'm so grateful for is having been in that place before with my health, with certain areas where I haven't known how I'm going to get to the other side. And at some point you find footing again and you come through. I'm thinking now, like, I want to remind people if they are in this unknown space that, like Jodie said, it's okay to be in that for a bit, and eventually, you will find your feet and balance out again. But being in it is part of the healing. Jodie, because I know we did our certificate in trauma, what's it called? Certificate in trauma therapy?
Yeah,
somatic trauma therapy at the same time. And I think, again, this is like a big part of the puzzle in terms of looking at health holistically, looking at how we can look after ourselves holistically. Interesting time we both did it, right in the midst of our changes. What have you found from this piece around connecting to the body? Like you said, prioritizing yourself. I learned that lesson completely too. But what about that whole moving the body and processing emotions through the body? How have you gone about that?
Yeah, so when we took that course, I was really excited to start integrating some of that with clients. And then obviously I took a break from work to focus on my family. And I remember being like, oh, that's really annoying. Like, I've learned all this stuff and it's all fresh in my mind. And then this is just how I framed it, is that actually I did that course because I initially had to integrate that into my own life first before I did that to clients. And that was a really essential component for me, because the mind-body connection is bidirectional, right? You can use the mind to help heal the mind and body, or the body to help heal the body and the mind. And a lot of our work, not all of it, maybe sort of 70, 80% is more mind down to body. But I couldn't engage with that because I was offline. That's that state, that dissociated state, and I couldn't engage with it. And so that's when I needed to use my body first to engage that, to help me start to be more grounded and more settled. So part of that was, as I said, getting more into exercise, swimming, walking, being in nature, just the really simple things that we all know about, but actually when you really need that stuff, you embed yourself into it more. Doing things, and I still do, like I dance in my kitchen every day, like in a really free flowing way. So I can use tools just as touch, getting back into our body again, grounding exercises. Something else that I did that I actually haven't really told anybody about. When I came back, I love singing. I'm not the greatest singer in the world, but I can hold a tune enough to sing as part of a group. I literally, almost as like I stepped off the plane, and I was like, I feel like I want to sing. I just want to join a choir of some kind. I went online, I choir locally, and maybe it's meant to be, I don't know. But this choir came up that was just about to start, that was all around musical theatre, which is my passion. It was like 20 minutes away. I was like, I'm just going to sign up. And so I've been going every Tuesday to this choir. And that in itself has been a real learning, because to begin with, the first 20 minutes are warm-up exercises, humming and vibrating and movement. And I cannot explain to you, Bianca, the level of discomfort when we move, like gentle movement, because I was so locked in a tension.
I was the same.
Yeah, there was nobody mean, there was other people, but nobody's looking at anybody else. You're just doing your own thing, right? So that has been a real learning to like allow myself to feel into it. And those are all somatic techniques. It's, stimulating our nerve, the humming and things. So I tried to see it as a form of therapy each time I went. And then being part of a group and singing. And now we're like 9 months down the road and we've got like a showcase coming up in a month or so. And it's all coming together and it sounds really lovely. I look forward to it every Tuesday. And that has been a big healing thing for me. There's only been a couple of times I couldn't show up because the world felt a bit too big for me. And it was my commitment. And it was like, maybe we'll talk about this a bit later, but one of the things I really struggled with was being social and seeing other, even close friends. But this felt like, again, a safe container of I didn't have to talk to anybody other than niceties. It was all about singing and listening and getting in touch with our bodies. Yeah, there's been a lot of somatic tools I've tapped into, which again has helped me switch back on my mind. And now I'm using things in a much more bi-directional way.
I feel exactly the same. I was exactly the same. I let go of all expectations and just did the self-care that, Jodie just said often we neglect, or we sort of think, oh, that's so basic, but the nature, hot showers, anything I could do that just to look after myself. I think when you've been doing brain retraining for a while, it does become automated. So the choices are there, and I think you are more aware. But just like Jodie said, the somatic stuff. So for me, polyvagal exercises, different energetic healings, which I haven't spoken on too much. I might do a separate episode, but something called Romi Romi, which is Māori Indigenous healing for those who aren't from New Zealand, which was honestly the most amazing ritual that I did at the start. I go there every week. I wouldn't know anyone. I just lie on the table, pressure points, energy healing. I would cry. I'd let it all out. I'd talk to them. It was quite spiritual. And that for me was just extremely healing. Again, I didn't have to do anything. It just sort of fell in at the right time. But that release in the body first to free up some space, even just self-massage and that kind of thing, I knew that intuitively that was the first thing I had to do to loosen up my body, to just feel safe and grounded in my body again. And since then, I've done a whole lot of different things. And I think, Jodie, you're saying like your singing, again, so powerful because through the vagus nerve, we're expressing the vibrations, the rhythm, plus it's your throat chakra, like getting to use that, letting stuff out, the anger, the voice. I think it's really powerful. For me, I've been getting into my dancing, which has been just as powerful because I've learned to feel more fluid in my body, and really empowered in that sense. And it's just been so healing for me. So I think we can't underestimate the power of movement and just being in our body. Anything to do with our body like that, it's so healing.
Yeah, just to go back to that energy healing portion that you were saying, when you're going through lots of change or something big in your life, we so want, and this was the same when we were both dealing with chronic illness, you want a magic pill. You want someone just to say, take this thing, it's going to make all that discomfort go away. And it just doesn't work that way. And we can either see that as like, oh my gosh, where do I begin? There's so much to do. Or like, this is so wonderful. There's so many different modalities out there. And I wonder which ones are going to work for me, my unique situation, my body, my life. And I've tried so many different things this year, from using the tools that I know to learning new ones, having coaching, to working with a therapist, to movement, and I also did some energy healing recently. It was interesting because a coach I was working with encouraged me to go and get this energy healing. And I was like, it feels weird, like to spend the money just to lay there. And she's like, no, because as a coach, you're always, you're giving, you're doing, you're thinking, you're figuring out, you're, actually, sometimes you need just to sit back and not think and just let it be. And that's an interesting way to think about it. Okay, I'm going to just go and do that. So I went for this energy healing, and she couldn't even really explain what she was doing. It's not like she was doing Reiki or there was a specific. She placed her hands on my feet. It was in the, I guess the roots were in reflexology. And during the session, she asked me a couple of questions. I didn't even tell her anything about myself really at the beginning. And it was an hour and a half, and I kind of left and I was like, no, it's quite nice to like chill for an hour and a half, but I didn't really feel much. And I've had a lot of Reiki in my past. A very close friend of mine is a magical Reiki healer. But I didn't feel much. And then in the weeks after, I have felt a different level of release. The way that I'm interacting with people, level, anger, frustration, it just doesn't seem to be there. Triggers have changed. So it was really fascinating, leaning into a very different modality, very different from what you and I are used to doing. Go back as well. And I've forgotten the context you said about a puzzle, but that's very much how it feels. Like, I think when you go through a big change, it is a change of identity. And I feel for me, it's like all those identity things, like where you live, who your friends are, your routine, your job, it was so many things that sort of, it felt like my puzzle had been, the box had been thrown on the floor, all the pieces scattered. Some of the bits went under the couch and I couldn't find them down. And so what I'm going to do is put the puzzle pieces back together to get that image again of who you are. And I'm not in any way I've got that together fully yet, but it's certainly becoming a much clearer picture. And those puzzle pieces come back through speaking to different people, through trying different modalities, through showing up for myself, through self-care, through rest as well, which is a huge component I've had to lead into a lot. So that's how I create this new version of ourselves. And you don't know what that's going to look like. And surrendering to know, actually, when I put it together, it might not look like I'm expecting it to look. And that's okay. And that's exciting. And that's intriguing.
And I think both of our experiences have had that level of grief because we're grieving what was or what we thought would be in our futures. What I've learned through grief, and whether that be breakups or losing someone and just different forms of grief, is you almost have to grieve so you can welcome in the new, in a sense. And it's like, I don't know, I feel like I am so much more myself now, and I know myself like inside out now way more than I did before my mum, which seems strange to me still because I'm still finding my feet and these days where it feels too much. However, it's like when you walk through something and you leave room for the unknown and you just know you're going to put yourself first and you do it step by step, you do tend to realize your power. And I think from that place, you become more yourself. I don't know if this is really resonating, but for me, I feel like you become unshakable in a sense if you continue just to stay open-minded to putting the pieces back together. And what you said around just pulling in different bits, I feel the same. I feel like I'm so much more open to different things now, like different modalities, not only that, but just different ways of thinking, trying different things. It's like in the past, I probably wouldn't have done that. I've always been open, but I wouldn't have thrown myself into things because you just have this level of courage because you're like, well, I may as well because I don't know how I'm going to look. I may as well feel it out, try different things as much as I can, given, time, financial constraints, and then kind of rebuild in that sense.
Yeah. And I think I resonate so strongly with everything you were saying just now. And I think part of it, when you're in the, excuse me, when you're in the trenches, as we spoke about at the beginning, all of that internal energy goes into what you need it for. And so I think some of those patterns that maybe we run, the people pleasing or the perfectionism or any of those things, there's not enough bandwidth for that. You have to let those go. And in the process of letting those go, you have no choice but to show up more as your authentic self in all of its different guises and in the shadows and in the bits of ourselves that we don't like, but don't have the energy to hide.
Yes, that's so true. That's so true. I really thought of that. And that way.
Yes, and I think it's disarming because those are, the perfectionism, all of those things, that they are a protection mechanism. And so when you let that go, you're sort of the vulnerability that comes out and you're susceptible, I guess. But that has helped me really step into more of who I am unapologetically, warts and all, because I don't have the energy to put it in. I've got too many other things I need to really put it into. And again, I'm not saying I've let go of all of those things entirely. We're human, and this is it's a journey, and it's an art. It's not linear, or it's not. That's the other thing I think actually has been very important to accept is that there's no end point, and it doesn't just do this. It's not just a straight line upwards. It's wibbly wobbly. And what you want to do is I can look back now and notice how far I've come, like lean into, okay, I'm noticing there's much longer stretches where I feel more relaxed and more calm and more present and able to focus and concentrate and socialize. And I might still have days where I feel a bit off, but I can see the gaps are widening. And I talk about this in the lightning process as that sort of concertina effect where, you feel yourself moving out and stretching into that window of tolerance. And then sometimes it compresses again and then you lean into it more and you're stretching out in that way. So many of the principles I think that we learned in the very early days of the lightning process of, is this useful, and connecting to your authentic self and looking for any glimmer of positive change. And that's not about pretending everything's okay, because sometimes I'll have a day or a moment or a morning where I'm like, I feel like crap. Like I have to lay down, I have to go to bed, I'm going to cry. And I don't see that as, and I say to myself, this is really useful because this is what my body needs right now. And it feels shitty and hard and difficult. And I wish I felt differently. Actually, the leaning into that is positive.
I fully agree. And I think that question, is it useful? That's often on the back of my mind. Or maybe not, is it useful? How do you, and I also ask, how do I feel after? So if I do get upset or angry, it's like, okay, how do I feel after expressing this? If I feel a sense of relief, then I will say, I know the work I've done on myself has worked over the years because I can express an emotion, but generally speaking, I don't get stuck in it. I might have through the depths of, grief, but now I feel like I walk alongside it and I've found a good balance of going back and forth and moving through. And I think that's what we all should really be aiming for, not denying any emotion of the human experience, but also like you were saying, Jodie, the tools we learn around the brain and filter, like our reticular activating system, even the basics like gratitude and knowing that we have influence over our thoughts. I think they're just always really powerful concepts I'm always going back to as well.
Yes, I completely agree with everything you were saying there. And one of the things I've really noticed this year is, when you're going through it, as we've said, you sometimes need to be in it and sit in that and feel through it. I was just saying, somebody said to me, you've got to go through it to get through it. Whereas this year, what I have found, and this is where I've been using much more of the brain retraining or NLP tools, is I really associate with dates. Towards the end of last year, there was a big shift and a big change. And so for me, I was like, right, new year, new chapter. And the first couple of months, I felt myself really exhausted. And I knew that was because I was in such a heightened state last year that as I was coming out of that, I needed to rest more. And then certain days I kept finding myself going, this time last year, this happened. And this time last year, that happened. And I remember how I felt at this time last year. And so I've been doing some work where I've been as this version of myself today, going back and offering that me of a year ago, who was like a deer caught in headlights at times, sat, as much compassion and love and support and kindness, and saying like, that sucks. Like, we can't change what happens in the past, but we can change, or we can help us or ensure that we take the most useful learnings from it. So I've been doing quite a lot of work, like as the older, wiser me a year down the line, like how can I support that version of me last year who needed the today to help her, sort of thing. And this is where, these things, as we said, there's no endpoint. It's like things come up, or a different date will come up for me. And I'm like, okay, that is making me feel X. I need to do Y to try and see how I can support me in that. And that might be resting, or it might be doing some NLP work, or it might be calling a coach, or it might be calling you to somebody who understands these things. And this is how I think we process through things. We process through grief and through change. And like, I've got a trip coming up later this year to go back to LA. And in many ways, I'm really excited about it. And in some ways, I'm quite nervous about it. But I think there's going to be something very therapeutic and very full circle for me to go back, because what my brain has done as a protective mechanism, it almost feels like there's, when you go on holiday and you come back and you're just like, oh, it didn't even happen. It just feels like it's double, It almost feels like in some ways, the 10 years, that feels like a bit like it never happened. And I feel integrate myself back into that, because it was a wonderful experience in so many ways. I'm so grateful for it. And I don't want it to feel, one way, because it was multifaceted. So I'm looking sort of going back and doing that part of the healing as well. Talk about healing. I think leaning into the fact that it shows up in so many different ways has been helpful too. And just to give an example, earlier this year, I went to Miami for my cousin's wedding, and it was the first time I had like a week off from the children. And before I left, I was like, oh, I've got a week to myself. I need to go to a retreat. I need to meditate. I need silence. That's what I need. I believe I'm going to like Miami and it ended up being the most unbelievably healing week for me, because I was sharing an apartment with my siblings. I'm one of four. And I spent the week like laughing in fresh air, getting up really late, not getting enough sleep, going to restaurants, drinking, being with people that I'm not familiar with, dancing, dressed up. And it was just like, oh, do you know what? What I needed was some fun. That was the healing I needed right now.
Right? Totally. I lost my fun for so long. In terms of healing, it is a huge component. Creativity, fun. And actually, I was talking to Teo about this on our latest podcast, just around that balance between, because we're in this healing space and we do it for work and we're, transmuting our own stuff, and you can kind of forget the power of just fun, of just being, not taking life too seriously, because we shouldn't. Life is short. We need to have those fun moments without all the labels of I'm this kind of person, I must do this, I must do this. Make that choice in the moment. Like, I'm all for having fun.
It's what we were saying before. There's no magic pill. There's no one way. What you need one week is different from another week, from one morning to one afternoon. And then it brings that back to just listening to the body. Like, what do I do right now? And again, the foundation of the lightning process is about learning to be in the present moment and tuning in. I went for a walk the other day, and as I was walking, I had this urge. I was like, I feel like I need to run. Why do I need to run? My brain said, why do you need to run? You haven't run for years. I was like, no, don't question. There's something in your body that's saying there needs to be some kind of a release. And so I just started running. And I'm not saying I'm going to run regularly. I don't know, but there was just this feeling that that's what I needed to do. And we think that looking after ourselves is, let's say in dietary terms, like sometimes that shows up for smoothies and salads and fresh food and wholesome ingredients. And other times it shows up as having a glass of wine by myself or sitting on the couch with chocolate and popcorn and, and so times and substance and goodness and all of those versions, if we can tune in and listen and say, what do I need right now? What is the most useful thing for me in the moment?
Yeah, 100%. And we both know, because we see it a lot with our clients, often the stress and the guilt of that you carry around trying to do things the perfect way or the right way, or eating a certain diet and putting on the extra pressure, especially when you're navigating change. It just adds that extra layer of self-critiquing, of control that impacts the nervous system. And so I think you're right. I think really the more we do this kind of work, it's more just returning to being human and getting in touch with our individual intuitions and our individual body's cues. And once we can start to do that, I think that is the most powerful thing, because it's going to change day in, day out. There's room for change. And it's compassionate. We're not bound to certain rules.
Yeah, definitely. I think, Bianca, you might resonate with this, but there's this feeling of, through all the work that we've done, personally and professionally, I have such a strong sense of my nervous system every day. And it's been a real blessing to have that understanding. And in many ways, going through big experiences is one thing about teaching people and supporting people and coaching people. And then you have these life experiences which sort of help you integrate all of these tools in a brand new way and give you so many more learnings that you can bring back into working with clients again, that it's, I don't know, I guess in some ways I try and see it as a bit of a gift.
Yeah, I think there's power when we can take the experiences, not deny our experiences, and then just learn from them. And what I really feel has happened to me is I've just got more breadth. Is that the word I'm looking for? Yeah. Life will happen. There'll be more things that I'm sure I have to navigate, more challenges, more fears that come up. But I think there's something about when you when you move through the tough times, you just gain a sense of empathy and you just gain a bigger picture. As practitioners, we can pull that wisdom into our work and share that with our clients.
Yeah, the thing that I probably learned through all of this is that it sounds simple to say, but I actually think that healing is quite simple. It doesn't mean that it's quick or it happens overnight or that you don't need to reach out to different people and modalities to help with that. But for me, the foundation of healing is self-worth, understanding who we are, connecting to our intuition, believing in ourselves, being our biggest cheerleader. And if I keep coming back to that as my anchor and my root, everything else kind of feels more simple. It's not to say that things are easy all the time, but if I keep coming back to that, then everything does feel easier over time.
Yeah, knowing ourselves, building self-worth. I actually want to remind people listening that self-worth, or it's my belief that self-worth and self-confidence and self-love, it's all built through these challenges. And it's those commitments to ourselves and just, I don't think it's built often during the easy seasons and when everything's going smoothly. It is built when we're forced to step into the unknown and to connect with ourselves. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree. And I think it also comes along with those principles of, yes, it grows a lot in those times when things are more challenging. And something that I intend to do is now be this way consistently, as I'm coming out and moving through and moving past and, new chapters and things. But I've learned so much about the importance of showing up for myself in the way that helps my children, in the way that makes me a better person with friends, my, capabilities to be social, and how it helps my clients too. I think it's the most selfless thing to do. I don't know. No, maybe that's not the right way to put it.
I don't think it's a bad thing if someone calls you selfish. I think, to a degree, I used to have this really comfortableness with that word, but I think we have to know ourselves and practice that compassion within first. I'm sure you will model that to your daughters, to everyone around you. And even watching you, when we occasionally catch up on Zoom, I've seen a complete change in you as well, in a really amazing way. And I'm really excited to see how you evolve. I like the word evolve through these experiences and your new value system and that kind of thing.
And I've seen exactly the same with you. I mean, it's such a pleasure anyway being partners with you in Mindflex, but actually just our lovely chats that we have where we get so much goodness actually that we use in the workplace too, but just in seeing you evolve and grow and change and process, it's been a real blessing in many ways to sort of have each other to help in this situation.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Yes, we evolve together. And our conversations on Zoom, we probably could have just recorded one of them and put it on as a podcast because there were definitely some gems dropped in those conversations. So as we kind of wrap up, I'm curious to ask you about, we won't go too far into the future because I know what that's like when people ask and you're like, I have no idea. But yeah, what do you see for yourself? Where do you want to head with work? And how does that look for you? Because we've got Mindflex, which is exciting.
So work-wise, I'm back doing lightning process seminars. I've actually got one starting tomorrow. I've also been doing a lot more one-to-one coaching, and I don't know if this is coincidence or, energetically drawing this in, but I've been working with a lot of clients who've been navigating change. And doing more workplace wellbeing talks and presentations through Mindflex, which I'm really excited to bring to the UK. So that's, I guess, how the next few months and probably the rest of this year looks for me work-wise.
Yeah, nice. Those of you who actually haven't heard about Mindflex, I will quickly touch on it now. So, 2 years, I can't remember, put together some workplace wellbeing workshops, which I have been running in the background, and Jodie's about to launch hers in the UK. And these workshops are really based around building physical resilience and building mental resilience, and just taking some of the core concepts and teachings that we teach our clients in a different sense as well, bringing in some new elements. So we want to get these concepts out to a more general audience so that we're not having people come to us chronically sick doing the lightning process. And that's where all of this workplace wellbeing really originated and started. I was going in to do talks for some of my clients at their workplaces, and then we came together to create a suite of different workshops for businesses. So as we get into that more, I'll be sharing more of that, and it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, maybe we'll have a catch up about that again later on in the year or something.
Yeah. Completely, totally should. So as we finish up, Jodie, do you just want to share where everyone can find you on social media?
Yes.
And website?
Yes. So my website is jodiegoss.com, and I'm quite active on Instagram at jodiegosscoaching. And always happy to have a chat with somebody just to see if I can help or point them in the right direction. So yeah, please feel free to DM or drop me an email and reach out in some way.
Cool. Thank you so much for coming on, Jodie. Like always, it's just like we could have chatted for hours and hours and hours. But it's just so special having someone that understands the ups and downs. We've done all the same training, we know all the same stuff. And I hope everybody listening took something from this. I hope it was reassuring for some. I hope you learned something for others and you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you so much for having me, Bianca. It's always just such a pleasure chatting with you in any capacity.